The firelight flickered against the darkness of the Colorado wilderness, like a beacon calling every predator and drifter within 10 miles. And Lucy Pemberton knew she had made a terrible mistake stopping here alone. She sat rigid beside her campfire, her father's old rifle across her lap, watching the shadows dance at the edge of the light as the September wind of 1878 carried sounds she could not identify through the pines. Every crack of a branch made her finger twitch toward the trigger. Every rustle of leaves sent her heart hammering against her ribs. She had left Fairplay 3 days ago with such confidence, convinced she could make the journey to Denver alone to claim the teaching position waiting for her. But now that confidence felt like the foolishness of a 22-year-old woman who had never spent a night outside the safety of town. The shadows moved. Not the gentle sway of wind touched branches, but deliberate movement, circling, prowling. Lucy stood quickly, raising the rifle with shaking hands. She opened her mouth to call out a warning, but her throat had gone bone dry. The firelight revealed nothing beyond its small circle of warmth, and everything beyond that remained a wall of impenetrable black. She could hear them now, definitely hear them. Multiple somethings, moving through the underbrush with purpose. Then a voice cut through the darkness, low and steady. "Easy now. Do not fire that rifle unless you want every outlaw and animal between here and the divide knowing exactly where you are." Lucy spun toward the voice, nearly losing her grip on the weapon. A man stepped into the firelight with his hands raised, moving slowly like he was approaching a spooked horse. He was tall and lean, wearing a dusty brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face. But what she could see showed a young man, perhaps 26 or 27, with several days of stubble on his jaw and eyes that caught the firelight with an amber intensity. "Who are you?" Lucy demanded, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "What do you want?" "Name is Thomas Sullivan," he said quietly. "And what I want is for you to lower that rifle before you accidentally put a bullet in me. I am here to help, not hurt." "I do not need help," Lucy said, though even she could hear how unconvincing she sounded. Thomas lowered his hands slowly, his gaze moving past her into the darkness beyond the fire. "Those wolves circling your camp might disagree with that assessment." He paused, listening to something she could barely hear. "4 of them, maybe 5. They have been watching you for the better part of an hour, working up the courage to test whether you are easy prey." Lucy felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. "Wolves? Big ones too, from the sound of them." Thomas moved to the opposite side of the fire, positioning himself between Lucy and the largest concentration of movement in the shadows. He drew his revolver with practiced ease, the metal catching the light. They do not usually bother humans this time of year unless they are desperate or sick. Either way, they need discouraging. He fired a shot into the darkness, the sound cracking through the night like thunder. Lucy flinched, her ears ringing. Thomas fired twice more in different directions, and she heard a yelp followed by the crashing sound of large bodies retreating through the brush. "That should do it," Thomas said, reloading his revolver with calm efficiency. "They will think twice before coming back tonight. But you should not be out here alone, miss. This country is not forgiving to those who underestimate it." Lucy slowly lowered her rifle, her hands still trembling but now from the aftermath of fear rather than immediate terror. "I had no choice. I need to get to Denver, and I could not afford the stage fare after buying supplies." Thomas studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dancing firelight. "You came from Fairplay?" "Yes. How did you know?" "Because I was just there, and I am heading back toward Denver myself." He gestured to the darkness beyond the fire. "My horse is tied up about 50 yards that way. I saw your fire and came to investigate. A lone campfire usually means trouble, and I was right. I appreciate your help, Lucy said stiffly, uncomfortable with admitting she had needed rescuing. But I can manage from here. Can you? Thomas asked, without any hint of mockery. Do you know how to read wolf sign? Can you tell if that water you are carrying came from a clean source or one that will have you sick for a week? Do you know which plants out here are edible and which ones will stop your heart? Lucy felt her cheeks burn. I have a map and supplies. A map will not keep you alive if you break your leg or if those wolves come back with more courage and emptier bellies. Thomas crouched by the fire, adding wood to keep it burning strong. Look, I am not trying to insult you. I am trying to keep you from becoming another story that gets told in saloons about someone who thought determination was enough to survive the wilderness. So what do you suggest? Lucy asked, hating how defeated she sounded. I suggest you accept my offer to escort you to Denver. I am heading that way anyway, and 2 people are safer than 1 out here. I give you my word as a gentleman that I mean you no harm. You can keep that rifle pointed at me the whole way if it makes you feel better. Lucy wanted to refuse, wanted to insist on her independence, but the memory of those shadows circling her fire was too fresh. She looked at Thomas Sullivan, trying to assess him in the firelight. He had an honest face, she thought, though she knew that meant little. But he had driven off the wolves when he could have simply ridden past her camp. That had to count for something. All right, she said finally, but I keep my rifle, and if you try anything inappropriate, I will use it. Fair enough, Thomas said, and she saw the ghost of a smile cross his face. I will bring my horse closer and set up my bedroll on the other side of the fire. We should get an early start tomorrow. It is a 2-day ride to Denver if we keep a good pace. He disappeared into the darkness, and Lucy heard him talking softly to his horse, leading it back to camp. The animal was a sturdy buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Thomas tied it securely and unsaddled it with efficient movements that spoke of long practice. He laid out his bedroll exactly where he said he would, on the opposite side of the fire, and settled down with his hat pulled low over his face. Get some sleep, he said. I am a light sleeper. Anything comes near this camp, I will know it. Lucy lay down on her own blanket, the rifle still close at hand, and stared up at the stars visible between the pine branches. She could hear Thomas breathing steadily across the fire, already asleep, or doing an excellent impression of it. Despite her wariness, she felt safer than she had since leaving Fairplay. The shadows no longer seemed quite so menacing with another person nearby, and eventually, exhaustion pulled her down into sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Thomas had the fire built up and was cooking breakfast in a small pan, looking perfectly at ease in the morning light. The forest around them had lost its menacing quality, revealed as a peaceful stand of ponderosa pines with golden sunlight filtering through the needles. Morning, Thomas said, glancing up at her. Figured you could use a hot breakfast before we ride. Coffee is ready if you want some. Lucy sat up, disoriented for a moment before memory flooded back. You did not have to do that. I was cooking anyway. No sense in both of us making separate meals. He divided the bacon and some pan bread onto 2 tin plates and handed her one along with a cup of coffee. Eat up. We have a lot of ground to cover today. They ate in companionable silence, and Lucy found herself studying her unexpected traveling companion in the daylight. Thomas had dark hair that needed cutting and sun-weathered skin that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. His hands were scarred and calloused, working hands, but he moved with a certain grace that seemed almost contradictory. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow. Something wrong. I was just wondering what brings you to this part of Colorado, Lucy said. You do not seem like a drifter, but you are not dressed like a rancher either." "I scout for the railroad sometimes," Thomas said, pouring himself more coffee. "Survey routes, assess terrain, check for potential trouble. Just finished a job near Fairplay, and I am heading back to Denver to report and collect my pay. What about you? What is a school teacher doing trying to cross the wilderness alone?" "How did you know I am a school teacher?" He smiled slightly. "The way you talk, the book I saw in your saddlebag, the fact you are heading to Denver alone despite being scared out of your mind. You have that determined look that teachers get when they believe education is worth any risk." Lucy felt herself flush. Education is worth any risk. "I come from a family of 7 children, and I was lucky enough to get schooling. I want to help other children have that same opportunity. The school in Denver needs teachers, and I need the position. My father died last year, and my mother needs the money I can send back." "That is admirable," Thomas said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Stupid to try it alone, but admirable." He stood and began packing up the camp with practiced efficiency. "Come on, Miss Pemberton. Let us get you to Denver in one piece." They rode through the morning, following a trail that Lucy would never have found on her own. Thomas navigated the wilderness like he could read the land the way she read books, pointing out landmarks and signs she would have missed. He showed her wolf tracks from the night before, the paw prints pressed deep into the soft earth near where her horse had been tethered. "See how big those are," Thomas said. "Those are not normal wolves. Probably came down from the high country because game is scarce. That makes them dangerous. A hungry predator will take risks it normally would not." Lucy shivered, realizing how close she had come to disaster. "Thank you for helping me." "You already thanked me," Thomas said. "No need to keep doing it. Just promise me that when you make this trip again, you will not do it alone." "When I make it again?" Lucy asked. "You think I will come back? Women like you always do," Thomas said, and there was something in his voice she could not quite identify. "You get an idea in your head about what needs doing, and you do it no matter what stands in your way. I respect that, even if it scares the hell out of me sometimes." They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat cold biscuits with dried meat. Lucy found herself talking more than she had intended, telling Thomas about her family, about her father's death in a mining accident, about her mother struggling to keep the younger children fed. Thomas listened without interrupting, his attention focused on her in a way that made her feel truly heard. "What about you?" Lucy asked finally. "Do you have family?" "Had a brother," Thomas said quietly. "He died at Gettysburg. My parents are both gone now, too. It has just been me for the past few years, moving from job to job trying to stay useful." "That sounds lonely." "It is," Thomas admitted, "but lonely is better than putting down roots and having them torn up. I have seen too much of that in this country. People build something, and then a drought comes, or outlaws, or sickness, and everything they worked for is gone. Easier to keep moving." Lucy wanted to argue that he was wrong, that stability and community were worth fighting for, but she could see the old pain in his eyes and decided to let it rest. They rode on through the afternoon, and as the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, Thomas led them to a sheltered spot beside a small creek. "We will camp here tonight," he said. "Good water, good grazing for the horses, and rocks at our back so nothing can sneak up on us." They fell into an easy routine setting up camp. Thomas built the fire while Lucy unpacked the supplies. They cooked together, and Lucy found herself enjoying the companionship more than she wanted to admit. Thomas had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh with observations about the various characters he had met in his travels. As darkness fell, they sat by the fire, and Thomas pulled out a harmonica. He played a slow, mournful tune that seemed to capture something essential about the vast, lonely spaces of the West. Lucy closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. "That is beautiful," she said when he finished. "Where did you learn to play?" "My brother taught me," Thomas said, studying the harmonica in his hands. "He played fiddle, and we used to make music together when we were boys. After he died, I could not stand to hear fiddle music anymore, but I kept playing the harmonica. It helps on long nights." "I am sorry about your brother," Lucy said softly. "Me too." Thomas put the harmonica away and looked up at the stars. "He would have liked you, I think. He always said the world needed more people willing to fight for what they believed in." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Lucy found herself very aware of Thomas across the fire from her. He was not traditionally handsome, she thought, but there was something compelling about him. A steadiness, a competence, a quiet strength that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. "Lucy," Thomas said suddenly, using her first name for the first time. "Can I ask you something, of course? Are you afraid of me?" The question caught her off guard. "Should I be?" "No," he said firmly. "But I know you have no reason to trust me beyond my word, and I do not want you spending this whole journey looking over your shoulder." Lucy considered her answer carefully. "I was afraid last night, but not anymore." "You have been nothing but respectful and helpful. I trust you, Thomas." She saw him relax slightly and realized he had been genuinely worried about frightening her. The thought warmed something inside her chest. "Good," he said. "That is good. Now get some rest. We should make Denver by tomorrow evening if we push hard." Lucy lay down on her bedroll, watching Thomas bank the fire and settle on his side of the camp. She found herself reluctant for this journey to end, which was absurd. She barely knew this man, and she had a job waiting for her in Denver, responsibilities that needed attending. But there was something about the way Thomas made her feel, safe and seen and valued, that she did not want to lose. She fell asleep to the sound of his steady breathing, and slept more peacefully than she had in months. The next day dawned clear and cold, frost glittering on the grass around their camp. They broke camp quickly and rode out as the sun was cresting the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that took Lucy's breath away. "Beautiful, is it not?" Thomas said, watching her reaction. "I have seen 1,000 sunrises out here, and they never get old." They made good time through the morning, the trail growing wider and more defined as they approached civilization. Thomas pointed out Denver in the distance around midday, the city sprawling across the plains where the mountains met the flatlands. "There is your new home," he said. "What do you think?" "It looks bigger than I expected," Lucy admitted, feeling both excitement and trepidation at the sight. "It is growing fast," Thomas said. "Railroad brought a lot of people, and more come every day chasing one dream or another." He paused. "Where are you staying once we get there?" "The school provides housing for teachers," Lucy said. "A boarding house near the schoolhouse. I have the address written down." "I will see you there safely," Thomas said. "Make sure you get settled before I go." They rode into Denver as the sun was lowering toward the mountains, and Lucy felt overwhelmed by the noise and activity. The streets were crowded with wagons and horses, people shouting to each other, hammers ringing as new buildings went up on every block. It was nothing like quiet fair play. Thomas navigated the chaos with ease, leading them through the streets until they found the boarding house. It was a neat 2-story building with a porch and flower boxes in the windows. A sign proclaimed it Mrs. Henderson's respectable boarding for ladies. "This is it," Lucy said, feeling a sudden reluctance to dismount. Once she got off this horse, her time with Thomas would be over. He would ride away to collect his pay and move on to his next job, and she would probably never see him again. Thomas seemed to be feeling the same reluctance. He dismounted slowly and came to help her down, his hands warm and steady on her waist. They stood close for a moment, and Lucy could see gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. You saved my life, Thomas." "You would have figured it out," he said, but he was smiling slightly. "You are tougher than you think, Lucy Pemberton." "Will I see you again?" The question escaped before she could stop it, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Thomas studied her face for a long moment. "Would you want to?" "Yes," Lucy said, deciding honesty was better than pretense. "Yes, I would like that very much." Something shifted in Thomas's expression, a warmth entering his eyes that had not been there before. "I am staying at a hotel on Grant Street while I finish my business here. Maybe I could call on you sometime. Take you to dinner, show you around the city." "I would like that," Lucy said, feeling her heart beat faster. "Tomorrow evening, then?" Thomas asked. "I can come by around 6. Tomorrow evening is perfect." Thomas helped her carry her bags to the boarding house door, and Lucy watched him ride away down the street, already counting the hours until she would see him again. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a plump, kindly woman in her 50s who showed Lucy to a small but clean room on the second floor. The other boarders were mostly young women like herself, teachers and shop girls and clerks, all trying to make their way in the growing city. Lucy met them at dinner that evening and found them friendly and welcoming, full of advice about navigating Denver. But her mind kept drifting back to Thomas. She barely knew him, had spent less than 2 days in his company, but something about him had gotten under her skin. The way he moved, the sound of his voice, the steady competence with which he approached everything. She found herself replaying their conversations, looking for hidden meanings in his words. She barely slept that night, too keyed up with anticipation and nervousness about seeing him again. What if the connection she felt had been all in her imagination? What if he failed to show up, or showed up and was completely different in the city than he had been in the wilderness? But when 6 o'clock came the next evening and Lucy came downstairs in her best dress, Thomas was waiting on the porch. He had cleaned up, shaved, and put on a proper suit, and the transformation was startling. He looked like a gentleman, all traces of the wilderness scout hidden beneath civilized polish. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her, and the open admiration in his voice made her blush. "You clean up nicely yourself," Lucy said, and he laughed. He took her to a restaurant she never could have afforded on her own, a place with white tablecloths and candles and food that tasted like nothing she had ever experienced in Fairplay. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had around the campfire. Thomas told her stories about his work, about the vast stretches of territory he had surveyed, the characters he had met, the dangers he had faced. Lucy told him about her hopes for teaching, about the difference she wanted to make in her students' lives. "You will be an excellent teacher," Thomas said. "You have that rare combination of intelligence and compassion that makes someone truly gifted at it." "How can you possibly know that from 2 days of acquaintance?" Lucy asked. "Because I have spent those 2 days watching how you approach the world," Thomas said. "You ask questions instead of making assumptions. You listen when people talk. You treat every new piece of information like it matters. Those are the marks of a good teacher." Lucy felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "You see me more clearly than people who have known me for years." "Maybe that is because I am paying attention," Thomas said softly. He walked her back to the boarding house as the city lights were coming on, and they lingered on the porch, neither wanting to say good night. "Can I see you again?" Thomas asked. "I know you will be busy with teaching, but maybe on Sunday I could take you to see some of the city." "I would like that very much," Lucy said. Sunday came, and Thomas was true to his word. He showed her Denver, pointing out the best shops and restaurants, the parks where she could walk safely, the library that had just opened with more books than Lucy had ever seen in one place. They talked and laughed, and Lucy felt herself falling for this quiet, thoughtful man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly. The pattern repeated over the following weeks. Thomas found excuses to stay in Denver, taking odd jobs that kept him in the city. He called on Lucy every Sunday, and sometimes on Wednesday evenings when she was free. They went on walks, attended concerts, sat in parks and talked until the stars came out. Lucy's students at the school adored her, and she threw herself into teaching with passionate dedication. But she found herself looking forward to those stolen hours with Thomas even more than the satisfaction of watching her students learn. He made her laugh, made her think, made her feel things she had never felt before. One evening in late October, as they walked through a park ablaze with autumn colors, Thomas took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her beyond helping her into a carriage or over rough ground, and Lucy felt electricity shoot through her at the contact. "Lucy," Thomas said, stopping under a golden cottonwood tree, "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, seeing uncertainty in his face for the first time since she had met him. "What is it?" "I am supposed to leave Denver next week. There is a surveying job in Wyoming that will take me away for at least 3 months, maybe longer." He paused, tightening his grip on her hand. "I do not want to go." "Why not?" Lucy asked, though her heart was already pounding because she thought she knew the answer. "Because of you," Thomas said simply. "These past weeks with you have been the happiest I can remember. The thought of being hundreds of miles away, not seeing you, not talking to you, it makes me feel like I am suffocating. I know we have not known each other long, and I know you have your teaching career to think about, but Lucy, I am falling in love with you." The world seemed to stop, the autumn wind holding its breath, the rustle of leaves going silent. Lucy stared up at Thomas, seeing her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I tried not to, tried to tell myself it was too soon, too fast, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, everything feels right in a way it never has before." Thomas pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Then what do we do about it? Because I need to work, need the money from this job, but I also need you. I cannot seem to reconcile those two things in my head." Lucy thought about it, her mind racing through possibilities. "What if you took the job but came back as soon as it was finished? I will be here teaching. I am not going anywhere. 3 months is not forever." "3 months will feel like forever," Thomas said, but she could see relief in his face that she was not asking him to choose between her and his livelihood. "But you are right. I can do 3 months if I know you will be here when I get back." "I will be here," Lucy promised. "Write to me, and I will write back. We will get through it." Thomas leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Lucy did not want to pull away. She rose on her toes to meet him, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I will come back to you," Thomas said fiercely. "I swear it, Lucy. Nothing will keep me away." The week passed too quickly. Lucy taught her classes and prepared lesson plans, but her mind was always partly with Thomas, counting down the hours until he had to leave. Their last evening together, he came to the boarding house and they sat on the porch in the cold October air, neither willing to cut the time short by going inside. "I will write as soon as I get to Wyoming," Thomas promised, "and every week after that until I can come back." "Be safe," Lucy said, fighting tears. "Do not take unnecessary risks. I want you back in one piece." "I want to ask you something before I go," Thomas said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. "This was my grandmother's. My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to a woman worthy of wearing it. Lucy, I know 3 months is a long time, and I know you might change your mind while I am gone. But if you do not, if you still feel the same way when I come back, would you consider marrying me?" Lucy's breath caught in her throat. She looked at the ring, then up at Thomas's earnest face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Thomas Sullivan. 3 months or 3 years, my answer will not change." Thomas slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed again, longer this time, pouring all their hopes and fears and promises into it. When they finally pulled apart, Lucy was crying, and Thomas gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. 3 months, he said. "I will be back before Christmas. We can get married then, start the new year together." "I will be counting the days," Lucy said. She watched him ride away the next morning from her window in the boarding house, the ring heavy on her finger. Mrs. Henderson noticed it at breakfast and raised an eyebrow. "Engaged, are we?" "Yes," Lucy said, unable to keep the smile from her face despite her sadness at Thomas's departure. "To Thomas Sullivan. He is coming back in 3 months, and then we will be married." "I remember him," Mrs. Henderson said with approval. "Steady man, that one. You chose well, dear." The days turned into weeks, and true to his word, Thomas wrote faithfully. His letters were long and detailed, telling her about the harsh Wyoming landscape, the difficulties of surveying in approaching winter, the loneliness of being away from her. Lucy read each letter multiple times, then wrote back with news of her students, funny stories from the boarding house, and confessions of how much she missed him. November brought early snow to Denver, and Lucy threw herself into preparing her students for the Christmas pageant. The work kept her busy, but every night she looked at the ring on her finger and counted down the days until Thomas's return. She had told her mother about the engagement in a letter, and her mother's response had been enthusiastic and encouraging, happy that Lucy had found someone who clearly cherished her. December arrived, and Lucy began to watch for Thomas's return with increasing anticipation. He had written that he expected to finish the survey by mid-December and would ride straight back to Denver. Lucy marked off the days on a calendar in her room, her excitement building. Then a week passed with no letter. Then 2 weeks. Lucy tried not to worry, telling herself that mail was slow and unreliable, especially in winter. But as December 20th came and went with no word from Thomas, she began to feel real fear. What if something had happened to him? What if he was hurt or sick or worse? She was sitting in the parlor of the boarding house on December 22nd, trying to focus on grading papers but mostly just staring at the Christmas tree in the corner, when there was a commotion at the front door. Mrs. Henderson answered it, and Lucy heard a familiar voice asking for her. She dropped her papers and ran to the entrance hall. Thomas stood there, covered in snow and road dust, looking exhausted but alive and whole and here. Lucy threw herself into his arms, not caring what Mrs. Henderson or the other boarders thought. "You are back," she sobbed into his coat. "I was so worried. Your letters stopped and I thought something terrible had happened." "I am sorry," Thomas said, holding her tight. "The survey ran long and we got caught in a blizzard that delayed us by 2 weeks. I could not get a letter out, could not do anything but wait for the storm to pass. As soon as we could travel, I rode straight here. I did not even stop to clean up or find a hotel. I just needed to see you." Lucy pulled back enough to look at his face. He had lost weight and there were new lines around his eyes, but he was smiling down at her with such love that she felt her heart might burst. "You are here now," she said. "That is all that matters." "I am here," Thomas agreed, "and I am not leaving again. I am done with surveying jobs that take me away for months. I am going to find work in Denver, something that lets me stay close to you." "Are you sure?" Lucy asked. "I do not want you to give up your career because of me." "I am not giving up anything," Thomas said firmly. "I am choosing you, choosing us. I spent 3 months in the middle of nowhere, freezing and miserable and lonely, and all I could think about was getting back to you. That made me realize what matters most, and it is not a job. It is building a life with the woman I love." Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat tactfully. "Why do you not come in properly, Mr. Sullivan? You look like you could use a hot meal and a place by the fire. I am sure Lucy would like to talk with you in comfort rather than standing in my drafty entrance hall." Thomas laughed, some of the exhaustion leaving his face. "Thank you, madam. That sounds wonderful." They sat in the parlor, close together on the sofa, and Thomas told her about the survey in more detail. It had been harder than expected, the weather turning vicious and the terrain challenging. But he had thought of her constantly, imagining their future together, and it had kept him going through the worst of it. "So when can we get married?" Thomas asked. "I know it is almost Christmas and probably not the best timing, but I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." Lucy thought about it. "What about New Year's Day? That gives us time to arrange things properly, and it would be a beautiful way to start 1879. "New Year's Day sounds perfect," Thomas said. He kissed her softly. "Mrs. Lucy Sullivan, I like the sound of that." "So do I," Lucy said, kissing him back. The next week passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Thomas found a small house to rent on the edge of town, nothing fancy but clean and solid with room for a garden. Lucy spoke to the school board about her marriage, and they assured her she could continue teaching as long as her husband approved. Thomas, when asked, said he not only approved but was proud of her work and would never dream of asking her to give it up. They were married on January 1st in a small church, with Mrs. Henderson and some of Lucy's fellow teachers in attendance. Lucy wore a simple white dress that one of the boarders had helped her sew, and Thomas wore his suit. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Lucy felt like her life was finally beginning in earnest. Their wedding night in the little rented house was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless and laughing and deeply content. Thomas held Lucy close afterward, running his fingers through her hair. "I cannot believe you are actually mine," he murmured. "After so many years of being alone, I never thought I would find this." "Neither did I," Lucy admitted. "But I am so glad I tried to cross that wilderness alone, even though it was foolish. If I had not, I never would have met you." "Those wolves did us a favor," Thomas said with a grin. "I should probably thank them if I ever see them again." Lucy laughed and swatted his chest playfully. "Do not even joke about that. I still have nightmares about those shadows circling my campfire." "You will never have to face something like that alone again," Thomas promised. "I will always be here to keep the shadows away." They fell into married life with surprising ease. Thomas found work with a local freight company, using his knowledge of the territory to plan routes and assess conditions. The pay was steady if not spectacular, and it kept him in Denver. Lucy continued teaching, finding deep satisfaction in watching her students grow and learn. Spring came to Denver, and with it, Lucy discovered she was pregnant. She told Thomas over dinner one evening, watching his face transform from surprise to joy to something like awe. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Lucy asked, suddenly nervous despite his obvious delight. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Thomas said, coming around the table to pull her into his arms. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed, Lucy. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I do not have words for what that means to me." Lucy relaxed into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart under her cheek. "I love you, Thomas Sullivan." "I love you too, Lucy Sullivan, more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Lucy taught until late summer before the school board insisted she take leave to prepare for the birth. Thomas fussed over her constantly, worried about her health and the babies. Lucy found his concern endearing, even when it became slightly excessive. "I am fine," she assured him for the 100th time as he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not made of glass." "I know," Thomas said, but he took the basket anyway. "But you are precious to me, and I cannot help wanting to protect you." Their son was born in September of 1879, a year after Lucy had made that fateful journey from Fairplay to Denver. The labor was long and difficult, and Thomas paced outside the bedroom while the midwife attended Lucy. When he was finally allowed in to meet his child, he looked at the tiny red-faced infant in Lucy's arms with wonder. "He is perfect," Thomas whispered, touching the baby's impossibly small hand with one calloused finger. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking about your brother," Lucy said softly. "Would you like to name him after him?" Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. Tell me his name." "Jacob," Thomas said. "His name was Jacob." "Then that is what we will call him. Jacob Sullivan." Thomas kissed Lucy's forehead, then his son's. "Thank you for everything, for being brave enough to try crossing that wilderness alone, for letting me protect you, for loving me, for giving me this life I never thought I deserved." "You deserve all of it and more," Lucy said firmly. "You are a good man, Thomas Sullivan, the best man I have ever known." They raised Jacob with love and attention, both of them committed to giving him the best life possible. Lucy eventually returned to teaching part-time, and Thomas continued his work with the freight company, eventually becoming a partner in the business. They were not rich, but they were comfortable and happy. When Jacob was 2, Lucy became pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter. They named her Sarah, after Lucy's mother, and she had her father's amber eyes and her mother's determined spirit. 2 years after that came another son, William, who was quiet and thoughtful like his father. The years passed, each one building on the foundation of love and partnership that Lucy and Thomas had established. They watched Denver grow from a rough frontier town into a proper city. They saw Jacob grow into a strong, kind young man who wanted to be a teacher like his mother. Sarah became a passionate advocate for women's rights, and William followed his father into business, showing a talent for numbers and planning. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Lucy back to the spot where they had camped that second night of their journey, the place beside the creek where he had played his harmonica, and she had first realized she was falling in love with him. They had gray in their hair now, and their hands showed the work of 2 decades, but when Thomas pulled out that same harmonica and played that same mournful tune, Lucy felt like she was 22 again, watching a steady young man make music under the stars. "You ever regret it?" Thomas asked when he finished playing. "Marrying me, I mean. You could have had an easier life with someone else, someone who could give you more material things." Lucy took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything that truly matters, Thomas. Love, partnership, children, a life built on mutual respect and affection. I would not trade what we have for all the money in the world." "I feel the same way," Thomas said. "That night I saw your campfire and those shadows circling it, I had no idea I was riding toward my future. I just knew someone needed help, but helping you changed my life in ways I could never have imagined." "We changed each other's lives," Lucy said. "That is what love does. It transforms us into better versions of ourselves." They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in those same shades of gold and pink that Lucy had admired on their journey to Denver so many years ago. The wilderness that had once seemed so threatening now felt like an old friend, the place where their story had truly begun. As they rode back to Denver in the gathering darkness, Lucy thought about the frightened young woman she had been, sitting alone by a campfire with wolves circling, and no idea how she would survive the night. She thought about the cowboy who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to say, who had kept the shadows at bay and then stayed to become her partner in building a life. It had not always been easy. They had weathered financial difficulties, illness, the challenges of raising children in a rapidly changing world. But they had weathered it together, and that had made all the difference. Thomas had kept his promise from that first night, never letting the shadows get close to her again, standing between Lucy and anything that threatened their happiness. And Lucy had kept her promise too, being there when he came home from that surveying job, building a life that gave Thomas the home and family he had been missing for so long. They had saved each other, she realized. Not just from wolves and wilderness, but from loneliness and despair, from lives half lived in fear of connection. Their children grew and eventually started families of their own. Jacob married a fellow teacher and had 4 children who called Lucy and Thomas Grandma and Grandpa, and filled their house with noise and laughter. Sarah married a lawyer and fought tirelessly for women's suffrage, making both her parents proud even when her crusade made them nervous. William took over the freight business when Thomas retired and expanded it into something neither of them had imagined possible. Lucy retired from teaching in her early 50s, after more than 30 years of shaping young minds. Thomas had already been retired for several years, and they spent their time traveling, visiting their children and grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. They took a trip back to Fairplay one summer, finding the town changed but still recognizable. Lucy stood at her father's grave and told him about her life, about the family she had built, and felt at peace. "He would have liked you," Lucy told Thomas as they left the cemetery. "My father, he would have appreciated how you take care of me." "I hope I would have measured up to his standards," Thomas said. "Any man who raised a daughter like you must have been someone special." They returned to Denver and settled into the comfortable rhythm of their later years. Thomas's hair went completely white, and Lucy's back developed a permanent ache from years of bending over student papers. But their love remained as strong as ever, perhaps even stronger for having been tested and proven over decades. On a summer evening in 1905, when they had been married for 26 years and their children were all grown with families of their own, Lucy and Thomas sat on the porch of the house they had moved to 10 years earlier, a larger place with room for grandchildren to visit. The sunset was spectacular, the sky ablaze with color. "I have been thinking about that campfire," Thomas said suddenly. "The one where I first saw you." "I think about it too sometimes," Lucy admitted. "I was so scared that night." "I know you were, but you were also brave." "Most people would have panicked and done something foolish, but you kept your head. That impressed me even then." Thomas reached over and took her hand, their fingers fitting together with the ease of long practice. "I knew that night that you were special. I did not know I was going to fall in love with you, but I knew you were someone worth protecting." "And you have been protecting me ever since," Lucy said with a smile, "though I think it became more of a partnership somewhere along the way." "It did," Thomas agreed. "The best partnership I could have asked for." They sat in peaceful silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had watched over them that night in the wilderness so many years ago. Lucy thought about the journey that had brought them here, all the twists and turns, the moments of fear and joy, the daily choices to choose each other over and over again. "If you could go back," Thomas asked quietly, "would you do anything differently?" Lucy considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally, "not a single thing. Every moment, even the scary ones, led us here, led us to this life, this family, this love. I would not change any of it." "Neither would I," Thomas said. "You were worth every shadow I ever fought away, Lucy. You and our children and the life we built. All of it was worth everything." They grew old together with grace and gratitude, watching their grandchildren grow, seeing the 20th century unfold with all its changes and challenges. They remained in Denver, anchored there by family and history, and the memories of a life well lived. Thomas died first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Lucy holding his hand. At his funeral, their children spoke about his steadiness, his kindness, his quiet strength. But Lucy knew him in ways they never could, as the man who had emerged from darkness to protect her, who had chosen her every day for more than 40 years. She lived another 5 years after Thomas's death, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. But she missed him every day, missed his steady presence, his dry humor, the way he had looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. When Lucy died at 82, her children found a letter she had written, instructions to be read at her funeral. In it, she told the story of that night in the wilderness, the campfire, the shadows, the cowboy who had appeared when she needed him most. She wrote about how Thomas had kept her safe that night and every night after, and how she had tried her best to give him the home and love he deserved in return. The letter ended with words that made her children cry and smile at the same time. "I was lucky enough to find my person, my partner, my protector and friend. If you remember nothing else about me, remember that I loved your father with my whole heart, and he loved me the same way. That love sustained us through everything life threw at us, and it will sustain me now as I go to join him. Do not grieve too much. I had a life beyond my wildest dreams, all because I was foolish enough to camp alone in the wilderness and brave enough to trust the man who came to help me. Your father saw shadows moving around my lonely campfire, and he made sure none of them got close to me. He kept that promise for our entire marriage. Now I am going to find him again, wherever he is, and this time there will be no more shadows, no more fear, just love that lasts forever." They buried Lucy next to Thomas in Denver, and their descendants continued to tell the story of the teacher and the cowboy, of the campfire and the wolves, of a love that had started in the wilderness and lasted beyond death. It became a family legend, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from moments of fear and vulnerability, and that true love is worth every risk.